Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the MOCA Live podcast. It is 2:31 p.m. EST as we record this. My name is Maxwell Cohen. I'll be your host this afternoon. Joining me on the MOCA Live podcast this afternoon is an incredible guest. We have the artist, poet, co-founder of Sovereign.art, Ezra Shibboleth, with us today. Ezra, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really admire very much what you guys do with MOCA, and I'm glad to join you.
We are glad that you're joining us. We have a lot to talk about today. I sent you some kind of conversation topics a couple days ago, and you hit me back with a couple more. So I thought we could start kind of in some territory that you wanted to begin with. You had asked me if we could talk about the various possible meanings of a token. And that sent my mind kind of thinking about the various possible meanings of a token. And so correct me if I'm thinking about this in a completely different direction than maybe you'd intended. But I was thinking about some of the ways that tokenized arcana have entered my life, right? Art, currency, POAPs being like a marker of time and a place. I've have NFTs that are raffle tickets or tokens that are raffle tickets, tokens that are provide membership in this or that club. So there's a lot of various ways, I think, that when we all kind of get down to the nitty gritty of it, demonstrate the variety of things that a token can represent within our lives. So I'm curious, at least up front, like what are the possible meanings of a token that excite you most? I mean, what was it that kind of first grabbed you about this topic that made you want to discuss it?
Well, the two main things that are on my mind about that at the moment are with first of all with Sovereign, with the art platform that we do that's with Pindar Van Armen and Justin Hyland.
Mm-hmm.
With that, we do serial collections, and I always think when we are working with the artist to design a serial collection and to curate, about how it can serve as a vessel for that person's presence in the culture, in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That it is, a serial, a set of tokens in that way, like of a somewhat substantial size, even just a couple hundred, has the capacity to operate in that way, in terms of what it is that a collector is collecting.
Sure.
And it came up too with Matt Cain just now, without, which is like talk of the town today. But
we're gonna get into that right away, huh?
Yeah, well, because he had one of the big points that came up around that was when he had written, "What does it mean to own a Matt Cain?"
Yeah.
That's something that in the art world is a common way of talking about collecting art.
Mm-hmm.
Like a person at a auction house will collect like a Warhol, or they'll collect like a basket. It doesn't, not that it doesn't matter what the piece looks like, but that's what they're collecting.
Yeah.
And that's the cultural significance, like, of, or the valence of what that action is about.
Sure.
For them. And I mean, in a way, I think, and also Matt maybe I think was pointing out the superficiality of that, but it's also something I think fundamental about the way that our minds work and the way that we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We, just even on the level of the way that we use, that words are in a sense like tokens for the object that they represent. And our personalities are tokens for what our true being is. It's in that way, it's fundamental to how we operate. And it can be done in a really superficial way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also something that can be wielded to recognize what it means when you're making a set of tokens, which is like to me, it strikes me always as like you're making a miniature currency. You're making a very, very small currency. That it is one way of looking at it. Like you're making a very, very small currency that that is trades the value of an idea or of a person of a cultural
Yeah.
presence. Like instead of like trading the value of the U.S. government or something, you can make it very, very specific, and
Well, yeah.
in that way.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like,
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by serial one of ones too, because like you said, like it's almost like a microcosm of the entire artist's like artistic ethos. At that point,
Yeah.
you get so many different narratives, you get so many different kinds of color studies, you get so many different like variations on a theme, in a way that always feels intentional. And I have a list of like all of the projects that you guys have done. I mean, you've worked with like Norman Harriman and Mikey Woodbridge, Ann Spalter, Pindar Van Arman, Alec, Look Highward, and in so many of these pieces, let's take Look Highward's possibility spaces, for instance. Like,
Yeah.
there's such a variety of every practical category of composition, of light, of color, of character, of tone, of mood, and yet it's still there's this kind of overhang, this kind of beating heart that is still, or rather is only visible, I think, through that glut of that artwork, in the same way that we would look back on the full glut of, you mentioned Warhol or Basquiat. You kind of have to see the whole career in order to find out where that heart is. And that's all happening in these like microcosmic drops, because you're invited to like both have a theme and have a complete variety of actual aesthetics involved.
Yeah, and I think that is something super important to understand in presenting a collection and designing a collection. At least it's what we try to do, because it's like so possibility spaces, for instance, there are gorgeous artworks. In another way, and not to say like on the flip side, but like in another way, like they are each a token of the general style and form that Look Highward developed. They're unique pieces, but they're each a token of intricate AI art.
Yeah.
in a way, and every collection is
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Simultaneous. No, I mean, it's simultaneously both the individual artwork that it is, and also each piece in a larger set, in a mini currency like that, is something that represents the value of whatever that specific vision or specific approach to art is. And it's a fascinating thing to me that it's like with tokenization, it makes it makes it possible that there's like a financially tradable currency for things that are previously just cultural currency, something intangible.
Yeah.
And it also makes it so that there's a way to give a reality to things that were or would normally be written out of the realm of currency. Things that are difficult to name, difficult to identify, you can, if in being personally able to like tokenize something, you have like you, in that sense, you're the sovereign author of the meaning of the currency,
Interesting.
and so that's one of the things that super fascinates me about
How do you feel?
tokens.
How do you feel about the possibility of a token being changeable after it's been purchased or traded or minted? That was part of a part of the discussion that I think the very what's the word? The very now notorious Super Rare Space or
That's
Twitter
right.
Spaces with Matt Cain and Pindar Van Arman yesterday. Is one of the things that they were
Yeah.
talking about was, or that Pindar asked is the contract immutable, or is the contract mutable rather? And Matt responded very vociferously and immediately, like, no, it's not. So I'm curious, as we have this conversation about like what a token means and its place as a marker of personality, a marker of a cultural moment, a marker of cultural currency, like, do you believe that these tokens should remain static after they've been minted? Or do you think that like the possibility of them being mutable, not just in aesthetics, but in like meaning, in access, etc., like, do you feel that that's in the spirit of the technology?
I mean, the spirit of the technology. Well, immutability is sort of a very fundamental principle to the spirit of the technology,
Mm,
and that that has its value. But it's also just an illusion. I mean, that nothing is immutable, of
sure.
course. Like, and in the sense that like what the meaning of the token, like I think, is much more about the person behind it, the moment that it's just, the moment that the connection happens between the person who creates it and the person who receives
Mm,
it, than it is about what uh, the image is.
definitely.
T- And I love images, and I'm not dissing images, but in that way, that an image or any artwork or um, any writing, any creation is in that way, I think, a placeholder
Yes, certainly.
for yeah, for like for the meeting point, or for like a place in consciousness or something.
Mhm.
And that is not, I that doesn't detract from the value of crafting something,
Mhm.
but it's, to me, it speaks to the just basically what we're doing as human beings in an important way, and why tokens make sense.
Yeah.
Like, why does it make sense to people at all that we do this? And that's another, I mean, like, I've been thinking a lot about how there were these times, like I came into the crypto art world like kind of not super early. It was February of 2021,
Mhm.
and I remember in around uh, April, May of 21, after there was like a bit of a kick in the beginning of the year, and then I remember thinking in April, May, it really seemed like it could just completely evaporate.
Sure.
That like it felt like that. It was like, okay, what was that? Was that even real? And then by the end of that year and into 2022, I feel like it really crossed a very important threshold of from like being maybe real
Mhm.
into something that is real. And it was surprising to me. But looking, at that point, it was like a rough time market wise, but it was very clear that there was a huge wealth of meaning and and an actual culture that of like in a broad way, like not that there wasn't
Mhm.
before, but that it had crossed a critical mass into reality.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's like the wildest thing that ever happens ever, is like when something crosses into reality.
Yeah.
And so that's like, yeah, but why does it make sense, like, and I think that, a big part of that reason is like that's it's basically the way that we relate with the world is through various versions of
Mm.
tokens. You
Interesting.
like
Yeah. No, please continue.
language. No, I mean, that's one wild thing about tokens.
Sure. I mean, like, perhaps this is too far afield, but like artistry is a kind of tokenized imagination. It's a kind of token, like,
Yeah.
of all sorts, obviously before hard and fast actual like blockchain minted tokens. I want to bring up you said something I was interested in before about that you're not being especially interested in the content of the token and like the actual aesthetics, or not being as interested as much as in the origin, who created it, when it was created, its intention, etc. And it reminded me, and a lot of this conversation has been reminding me of a documentary I watched ages ago, or maybe it was even a 60 minutes segment, like a news segment, about a forger, like a really talented forger. He was a Chinese gentleman, and he worked in this very small canvas lined like stall, and I'm not sure which city, but he was like the greatest forger on earth, and he could create these paintings that down to the very brushstroke mimicked those of the great masters. And it's very interesting to consider the value of what's actually in the frame, right? If we look at the frame as the token equivalent, right, it both contains the original art, the original artist, all of those things, and it doesn't at the same time. And in the same way that,
Yeah.
like, we have an Xcopy piece in the museum's Genesis collection, but the metadata has been lost. So while we have the intention and we have the origin and we know the story, the actual aesthetics are gone, and irretrievable. And it's just such an interesting paradigm to be kind of involved in real time and see it kind of being challenged. And then Matt Cain obviously challenging it further. Not just what it
Yeah.
means to like own a Matt Cain or get a Matt Cain, but what does it mean to like tokenize a Matt Cain and squeeze that identity into block hashes that point to an image.
Yeah, right. No, and the Cain is bringing in another aspect of that speaks to the forgery in the sense of looking at the future of like, or looking at what AI means.
Well, it's like reverse forgery, right? It's like instead of somebody creating something in the vein of the artist, it's like the artist creating something in the vein of, I don't know, in the vein of an idea of themselves or like an antithesis of themselves.
Yeah, no, well, what he's doing with it is different from that sense of like, in a way of like looking at the future of like AI will be able to reproduce anything. But yeah, he was I think maybe more specifically looking at just like low effort glut of AI. Yeah, I don't know, whatever.
Sure.
It's talking about a lot of different things, but
well,
that does, yeah. So like the forger, that painting forger of the past is like the AI of the future. And with AI too, it's like wild to me. It's maybe not that wild, but it's wild to me that the language models are just a set of also of tokens that they break meaning into its smallest units, and that it's just this set of units of meaning.
It's just morphemes.
That are tokens in that system. And so that's maybe our most powerful technology that's out there now, is made of tokens.
Well, I'm gonna please finish.
More importantly, no, just more importantly, like it does construct meaning. It constructs meaningful statements out of tokens.
This,
and
sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you're a quite talented and quite prolific poet, and I studied a fair bit of poetry in college, and interesting to have this conversation where we're talking about bringing kind of culture, artistry, meaning down to these like actual morphemes, phonemes, the like building blocks of meaning. And I'm thinking about like modernist literature. That was my specialty when I was studying. And I'm thinking of Wallace Stevens, and I'm thinking of E.E. Cummings, and I'm thinking of Ezra Pound, who were working with these building blocks. They were working with sound, and they were working with like onomatopoeia, and they were working with like clashing, like, meaningless symbols, meaningless like images. T.S. Eliot did that too, where he's just like throwing together highly volatile adjectives and highly volatile situations, but the meaning is kind of like, it's almost like anti-meaning. And it's very interesting to see, especially when like these AI start to hallucinate. I use ChatGPT a ton for like independent writing projects for research. It's like an invaluable tool. And somebody asked me how I know it's hallucinating, and you kind of don't, but you also kind of always suspect that it is. So it's this Schrodinger's cat situation where things are both completely meaningful in the way that you believe them to be, and also inherently unmeaningful, just in the same way that like the forged artwork is both the original artwork and not the original artwork, depending on secondary factors, belief. I mean, if you have a forged Monet in your room and you're, above your duvet, and you believe for 20 years that it's a Monet, and then you find out that that it isn't, like, for all intents and purposes, you did have a Monet above your room, or in your room rather.
Right. Right.
I don't know. It's a
Yeah,
fascinating conversation.
I was thinking about that earlier today too, because I was looking at do you know the Ankawara, the conceptual artist? He's like date paintings, and my favorite project of his is a project with this one for I think it was like 13 years or something. He would send these telegrams to various people, and the only line of the telegram was "I am still alive."
Whoa.
And that was like, I think his only communication or something, for maybe I'm getting that wrong, but for those years. And I love these telegrams, and I was looking them up today. And they auction them. They're art pieces. They auction them at Sotheby's, and they sell them. And I was thinking like, man, maybe I could get one of these. And they auction, I don't know, they're like $5,000 or something that they auctioned for. And I was like, okay, well, but then I thought, like, why is that cooler than if I just write "I am still alive" on a card and put it on my wall as like a representation of that that idea? And then
one of my prized possessions is a letter. It's a typewritten letter by Ernest Hemingway wishing a friend of his a happy birthday, and signed on the bottom. And which is great until you kind of start thinking about it. Then you're like, well, I don't really know the spirit that this letter was written in. I don't really know the history. It's just memorabilia. And while that's great and all, but I think that's an interesting question. Why, if I write the same letter, sign it the same way, there's obvious answers there, but
there was somebody who was just talking about that too, with like what is the difference between
well, it's like
an original.
I mean, this is, I think, getting into a larger conversation about digital art in general, right? The reason people think, I talk about this all the time, but if you went to Google right now and looked up "is digital art," the first thing that would come up is digital art real art? And I think the thing that it's still very difficult for people to wrap their minds around is that there's not an actual interaction of like my body with the thing that you're looking at. So a painting is really easy to understand the artistry in it, because I have the paintbrush in my hand and I'm interacting. There's you're looking at the liminal space, or crossing the liminal space in which this person has left their mark on this object. So you look at what was the artist's name with the telegrams? I'm sorry.
Ankawara.
So you look at Ankawara's telegrams or this Ernest Hemingway letter, and it's like this person interacted with this thing. So the history of that actual thing is important. But again, the meaning of the thing is so, I don't know, based in your knowledge of what it is. It's so based in like your own experience. Or what were we gonna say?
Yeah, no, it's your own. Well, I mean, there's that whole like issue of whole issue, but like I think it just came up because it was somebody was quoting Walter Benjamin, who was thinking about these things, and what he came to was that the distinction of an art object is it has an aura, which is like like a mystical way of saying it, maybe, but also, I guess, just a pragmatic way of describing what that interaction is when you have a physical experience of the connection to the creator of a thing. And I don't know that there's another way to describe it, but it's like the token abstracts out the idea of the object from the object, and it makes it into like a unit that represents that and can be traded as that. And it sort of also points to maybe a direction that humanity is headed in general. Like just over the last centuries or whatever, we've abstracted ourselves increasingly to the point, we're now making maybe an abstracted mind at I don't know. And obviously also like becoming just basically more digital, just more of experience becoming digital.
Sure.
And it doesn't seem like outside of some really unexpected cataclysm that progression would stop.
Yeah.
I wish it would.
Well, I'm not sure that even an unexpected cataclysm would stop it, because I think that we would be so hungry to
Yeah.
get back online that we would be reforming.
Just make
Yeah, we'd be reforming the old technologies or new technologies in the image of the old.
Yeah,
We
probably.
wouldn't go in a
Yeah.
different direction, right? We wouldn't be moving off to explore like different technologies altogether. We would just be trying to reclaim that which we knew and had lost. If you put a
Yeah,
gun to my head and
maybe.
asked me to predict the future.
What's gonna happen? Yeah, probably. I mean, we have a nature,
Yeah.
but it does align with like why tokens make so much sense and why crypto makes sense,
Yeah.
because like there hasn't been before that really adaptation of the way that humanity defines the value of a thing outside of like physical scarcity.
Mhm.
In there hasn't been an adaptation that, other than crypto, really, that meets that shift into like just the whole fucking internet,
Sure.
you know? And that's something I think about too, of like when people in questioning the reality of what we're doing, which is up for question again. You know, I don't know, like with that right before Matt Cain, it was the Rolling Stone.
Uh-huh.
The song,
Yeah.
because it was the Rolling Stone. And so you know, the death of NFTs was declared again. But like, and most people I talk to, or most people I know, are not in crypto,
Mm.
and you know, a lot of them, they don't like it. But we talk about it because I'm doing it, you know, and they listen. But to me, that's also what I return to, is that it's not a matter of like where the wave has gone with like the valuation of an ape or whatever. It's a much broader shift that is really the first major adaptation to the shift away from physical scarcity to digital life, and the way that our experiences
And well,
are
I think scarcity is the word that's often thrown around, but I think just in allowing us to make digital memorabilia, there's such an importance there. I, you know, the new iPhone came out recently in the US, and as always, they
yeah.
tout the new camera. And as always, I go through my phone to see all these pictures that I've taken. And there's such an interest in preservation of the physical world, in fleeting moments of the physical world, in fleeting emotions, right? You're trying to preserve something like that. And the internet to this point has not had anything in that real same vein. It has not had a preservation device. Now there's the Wayback Machine, something like that, but you have to know what you're looking for. And the joy, I think, of looking through like my parents' old photo albums is discovering things of yourself and of the people you love that you didn't know you were looking for. And that, I think, is a really important power of tokenization. Is it's just preservation in some sense. Um, and the idea of like all of the time I spent on StumbleUpon in high school and middle school, all of the people I met on Omegle as I jumped from random chat room to random chat room as a too young child doing that. Like those are memories that I wish I could recapture in more than just these really fleeting reminiscences that I have. They don't have shape, they don't have detail, they don't have the depth that if I had like a picture, I could. And I mean, we're still farting around here at the beginning of this blockchain thing, and how it, I think, is going to really snake its way into the internet and into digital experience. But I think people kind of miss the mark a little bit when they talk about it as a mark, as I mean, it's ownership, great. Digital ownership is one thing, but it's so interesting to just be able to preserve for your own records the things you do
Yeah.
online, which to this point have not been, they've just been so transient.
Yeah, preservation is a really interesting question, particularly for a museum. like you guys, because also, you know, the role of museums in the past was to preserve the physical integrity of those
Yeah.
objects. But in the current, or, you know, future context, it's not about the physical presence of them. It's about uh, being able to find them in the flood of
Yeah.
information, and also to be able uh, to value them in the flood of attention,
Interesting. Yeah. Well
like,
said.
to, you know, to preserve them as like things that we can talk about with mutual intelligibility.
And also
And, you
knowing
know,
what we're and being able to like look back at the thing and talk about it with specificity, um, I think
yeah.
is equally important, right? To be able to point to the thing and say, okay, no, we're discussing this. It is not beholden to your memory of the thing or your perception of it. We have the common object to have between us.
Well, I don't know if that's ever possible,
Well,
but
it's
it's,
fair. Spoken like a true poet.
I guess, it helps. But you do need to be able to have something that you know, that you can volley back and forth.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's also like a issue with like, how are we going to deal with all the fake AI images, you know?
Mhm.
And like that's not so different from how are we going to deal with all the fake ideas,
Mhm.
or how we can we deal with like an unmanageable wash of human projection, or mints, you know.
Yeah, sure.
It's all kind of the same question
Uh-huh.
of like, and that, yeah, it's like,
I don't have an answer for you.
what, well, but I think it's another reason why tokens and blockchains make sense. It's like, why they click,
Mhm.
um and even if even for somebody who you don't have to be able to explain the technology of it to know if it clicks or not, if it makes sense or not.
Sure.
And like, yeah, so like a token in that way is something that is able to pinpoint a particular zone of meaning,
Mm.
and make it communicable, which is the same as tradable.
Interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
so another cool thing about tokens.
I want to move on from tokens briefly because I want to ask you about sovereign, and more specifically, I want to ask you
Yeah.
about the challenges. I mean, it's an audacious project because serial one of ones do not beforehand really have, at least in terms of the nomenclature, have kind of recognizability. But you know, theorizing, building, and launching any new platform in the middle of a bear market is like extremely audacious. And I'm curious, just like what were the challenges of having this idea at the time in which you had it and launching it at the time in which you launched it?
Well, you know, Sovereign started out in, what was it, late 21, actually. Like the first Sovereign drops were, what's that? Am I getting that? Yeah, no, they were in they were not in the bear market,
Okay,
actually.
interesting.
Uh, but Sovereign started out just as Pindar and
Hmm.
Justin, um, doing doing drops for artists. It came out of Pindar's BitGans,
Gotcha.
and uh, Justin and Pindar started working together doing the collab GANs that Pindar did,
Hmm.
and then they had you know, a way of making their own contracts and a way of making their own release dApps,
Hmm.
the drop site, and they just they thought we could do this for other people. Other artists came to them to do it, and then but the platform was sort of in the background until early 2022.
Hmm.
Uh, it had a website and an account and whatever, but it wasn't really put forward as a curated platform.
Mm-hmm.
It was just sort of providing contracts and providing drop site. So when I joined them, that was my what I came on doing was looking at that and thinking like we can pivot this into being a curated platform and put it forward, and put forward our point of view as a means of curation and as a means of elevation. So that's when I came on and sort of like was with the revamping of the platform into something that is like, yeah, we're sovereign art. This is a creative platform. And so like one way that we like are able to meet the challenges of like rough market and whatever, or like the funding VCs exiting the crypto world and whatever, is that we have like zero operating costs.
Sure.
We're just three people.
Yeah.
We're just three people who just do this, and we only do drops when there's something that we like and think is a high quality,
Mm-hmm.
and we each work independently, and none of us is ever like at that point of feeling like overextended. We're doing each of us what we want to do, and it meshes.
Mm-hmm.
And also like other like platform, a lot of platforms have folded because they couldn't meet operating costs. They were like overextended in having giant teams, or like like spending too much to do marketing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we're I think of Sovereign as I really like it's so like we're indie in that sense.
Sure.
And I think of it like we're not our way of making waves is not like creating giant hype campaigns. I think that what we do is like remain solid.
Yeah.
we remain a rock.
Mm-hmm.
And the waves move around us, and I like in a while it'll be like, oh, look, those waves have washed away, and that fucking rock is still there.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a great platform, and the works speak for themselves. And the reason I guess that I had believe that it started in the bear market was just looking at the curated drops that you guys have done. Alex Cope Volume 1 and a couple of Ann Spalter projects, a couple of Norman Harmon projects, Mikey Woodbridge's Latent Couture, Possibility Spaces, which we were talking about, and then Bike Gans, all of which were, I think, June 2022 at the earliest till very recently. So even if not perhaps launched in a bear market, most of this recent iteration of Sovereign seems to have been developing in what is a difficult market. But nevertheless, these pieces, or these collections rather, I recognize these names more than I do, not necessarily of the artists, but of the collections. They generate some kind of real buzz when they are dropped. And I'm curious, like, this is a really interesting combination of artists, and a really interesting combination of various levels of, I guess, fame and notoriety. So why this combination of artists so far? And like, what do you look for when you're choosing which artists are going to represent Sovereign officially versus, ones who might be better off kind of using the software and having like an open drop?
Well, we're not doing the open drops anymore, but we had the opens. But what we look for in curation, more so than an aesthetic style, is ethos of sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the definition of that is something that is sort of in a way intuitive, but in a way also it has to do with the real choices that are at hand in the scene of like, are you signing with a entertainment agency?
Mhm.
Are you like joining like a artist stable? And I'm not putting down people who do that, but it is a distinction. And it's like, to me, it's really it's important that there is an, a developed artistic practice behind what they're releasing.
Mhm.
It's very easy to create visuals, and like kind of anybody can make a set of that just has a visual, but like with um, one of the considerations with a platform is that it's elevating whoever we put on there.
Mhm.
And like this is also like a broader reason why the crypto art scene to me is a very groovy thing, is because it's a way that a lot of artists who have been working for years and years and struggled financially, it's a way of making their lives sustainable. So I look for things that are representative of a long-standing practice,
Interesting.
of a meaningful practice.
Sure.
W- Another one of our uh, criteria, which came from Pindar, was the kind of the maxim, the traits tell a story.
Mm.
And so that's another thing that we make sure is always there, is that there is a form of storytelling through an arc through the collection, and narrative substance. And so those things don't relate to the aesthetic or the identity of the artists, but those are sort of some of the guiding principles in the
Yeah.
curation of like why those
So,
pieces.
like, how careful do you have to be about, each of these decisions to add an artist to a curated drop? Maybe I'm being exaggerative, but it feels like one misstep. There's so much animosity in this space right now. I think as a consequence of people being on edge just with the general economic circumstances, and people are looking for things to sink their teeth into and take a bite out of. That's just the reality. And I'm not saying that as a negative necessarily. It's just kind of how, in my limited experience, these kind of markets develop. People get cutthroat when things get difficult. So in this ecosystem in which one misstep can either sink a project, or probably more probable than that, like a mismanaged drop can extinguish momentum. Like, how careful do you have to be about each decision that you're making as like this group of three?
um I kind of, it's funny, like I was just thinking about this earlier, of like I was thinking about Matt Cain and Kevin Abash,
Mhm.
and the way that both of them, like with Abash as these open editions. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
looking at
yeah.
he's
If
these days.
if you
Yeah,
know,
like
that's one that came out yesterday, I think.
he says a new one, but he had a few in the last months that were like really his one called open edition, just called Kevin Abash open edition, and one called like Food for Degens.
Mhm.
And so, and throughout that, he was toying with the collectors and toying with their expectations, and people were like kind of on for the ride. They're like, all right, go Gabosh. But because that's how they, he's known as an artist who uses gamification, and he's known as an artist who uses these like social dynamics. But when Matt Cain did the contractual obligation collection, also presenting something very pointedly, saying I am playing, or questioning, playing with expectations, collectors' expectations. It, a lot of people were pissed off.
Well, I think an
Um,
important distinction is just the investment in each of these sides. The relatively limited investment in a Kevin Abash Open Edition, compared to other things in the space, 0.02, 0.03 ETH versus the staggering amounts of money that people paid for rare passes, and the potential.
there's that.
What was that?
There is
Yeah,
that. There is
yeah,
that.
and I think that that's probably like, it's not just your expectations, it's also your level of investment in the thing. So the idea
Well,
of acquiring a Kevin Abaj open edition up front, you're paying money for something that you probably don't have your hopes in as being like the seed fund for a house in 5 years. But the news that you're going to receive a Matt Cain limited work, the hopes and Zora Neale Hurston said, "Ships at a distance carry every man's wish aboard," and it's like it's that, right? You see this drop coming, and it has every possible um, it has every possible endpoint for you, and then to find out that it is nothing along the spectrum that you'd imagined. Um, I That's my
there is
point.
that.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lengthy way of saying a short
That,
thing.
that's very true. What was the Zora Neale
Oh,
Hurston line? I didn't
yeah,
catch
it's
it.
the first line of "Their eyes were watching God." Ships at a distance carry every man's wish aboard.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right
Yeah, it's
on.
just one of my. It's
Uh,
one of two quotes that I have memorized from that
yeah,
literature in the 20th
that
century, but
is
I
cool.
love it. Um,
That is a great. I
yeah.
think that's one aspect, but like another another part of it is like if things that are cohesive with people's perceptions are not regarded as being disruptive, like in the way, I mean, it can be a very something that is like upsetting or something, but if like the perception is like this person does that kind of thing,
Mhm.
then it's not like um then it doesn't create like the kind of animosity that you were mentioning of like if we choose the wrong drop,
Yeah.
if people jump on us in the nasty crypto
Well, it's
Twitter.
the Andy.
So, and
Yeah, yeah, please.
yeah, no, so I mean, with that, like with being like we really love being an indie platform and being sovereign,
Mhm.
and in the way also that like early crypto artists or whatever, like Norman Harmon and um Max Osiris or Rob Ness or whatever, like do shit that just like pisses people off, or it's just
Mhm.
like they'll fucking say anything,
Yeah.
but it's like they're still around because that's who they are,
Mhm.
and it's like the same, another person could say the same things and they would be like killed, whatever, because it would be inconsistent with how they're perceived,
Sure.
or how they put themselves
Well, it's
forward.
the Andy
So it's
Kaufman
like,
paradigm, right? It's like if Andy Kaufman, if you're going to see him as a comedian, and again, just to keep it within Matt Cain's kind of like
yeah,
universe, you go see him as a comedian and he ends up reading The Great Gatsby, which he was known to do, you're frustrated and upset. But if you're aware of Andy Kaufman as the performer and you go understanding that weird, boring, strange, confrontational stuff is a possible outcome going into it, then when you receive that outcome, you don't have nearly as much of a reaction. But maybe that's a failure as well, because it's a lot of power in Matt's hands to evoke that reaction because it was such a pivot, because it's unexpected. I mean, you can only do that once in an artistic career. Matt can never make that kind of statement suddenly again in the same way. And that's,
that's yeah,
it's a
interesting.
power you get to express once.
To make something that's about breaking expectation, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like for us, for Sovereign though, for instance, like what I mean for Sovereign is that like being an indie platform gives us like leeway, I think, to do stuff that maybe does piss people off, but it's like the fact that we're an indie crypto art platform, and it's like who we are, so it's not inconsistent with what we're proposing,
Sure.
like that's what we're saying, like we are just gonna be like a rogue indie platform, like we don't have the answer to any investor or any like whatever is like, so you know, in that way I feel we have the freedom to to choose like who we what we think is like high quality. And like uh
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's in the same way that we were talking about, the ability to tokenize kind of abstract concepts, like the representation of sovereign in these drops is itself a kind of like many tokened expression of your ethos. And just as like the aesthetics are less important than everything else, I guess it makes sense that, like I said, like a misstep or quote unquote misstep or a mismanaged something or other somewhere down the line, well, like if the ethos is strong and if the works have been
yeah,
dropped with intention and
yeah,
integrity, like that's what gets imbued into the token even more than what's actually what you're
I
actually
guess so.
seeing there.
What do you what do you mean would be like, what do you mean a misstep, like, or just a really bad collection?
No, I mean,
Like
people.
what?
Listen, it's a. All I know is that the platforms of note, call it super rare, call it OpenSea, Blur is a shit show, but when Known Origin, it was Known Origin that got bought by eBay, right? Like it just there
Yeah,
are these, whether it's Rare Pass, whether it's
right,
OpenSea getting rid of the creator royalties or Known Origin getting bought out, like there are these events that decisions that are made, best of intentions aside, that spark vitriol, and are going to spark reactions, um, that may endanger the platform itself. So when I say
yeah,
missteps, I don't mean that like you're going to put out like a shitty artist or a shitty drop. I just mean that like I guess maybe I do mean that. I mean, you make the wrong kind of connection
yeah,
with somebody who turns out to not be what they said they were, or there's this record that you had this partnership with somebody who was doing unsavory things or was engaged in some kind of unsavory practice, and it reflects on the platform, even if it's not necessarily your fault. So, um,
yeah, definitely, right.
an
um
open-ended question, indeed.
yeah, that's interesting because it's like it's often not possible to do like super due diligence on people who are anon, or there's not a ton of information about a lot of people on the they're pseudonymous. But so yeah, I don't know. And I mean, I'm thinking of like what went down with that three dude and like shit. Like I don't know what would I do in those shoes?
Mm,
I don't know. Like one thing is that like I can there's people get uh people have a stake in where big amounts of resources are going,
yeah.
and in uh like in that sense, like big chunks of territory and the landscape of resources. And the platforms that are built on a lot of upfront funding or VC funding or something are big chunks of of land in that way.
Hmm.
And we are three people who release art projects.
Hmm.
And in that in that way too, it's like um we're only representatives of ourselves,
Yeah.
I guess it's like there's some freedom in that. I think we think a ton about like um if the collections we're putting out can sell. And that's not just because we like to sell stuff. It's like we like to sell stuff, but it's also because it always bears on the next person who's going to drop with us.
Hmm.
If our last how our last drop did.
Sure.
And I mean, so having that, like making sure that there's like a clear that the there is clearly communicable aspects of the collection and that it can hit is important. And like so far we have sold them all out, which is like, I don't know, they're not like there's a million of them, but I'm kind of proud of the fact that we have done it. And like every time I think like, is this the one that's gonna just kill us? You know,
Sure.
like I think of the question that you're mentioning like every single time, and it's like, but it also because it's like it's always crossing the threshold of like a thing that's just an idea into a thing that's a reality, and it is always a terrifying threshold. But
Indeed. Well,
our method, we throw ourselves into that
yeah.
into that
Well, as often happens, the best possible name for the podcast comes about in like the very last couple of minutes. So maybe that'll do it for the terrifying threshold featuring Ezra Shibboleth.
Oh, right on.
That's pretty good. You should write a poem with that name.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure T.S. Eliot already has. It sounds like one of his. So let's get out of here before we take up too much of the people's time. Ezra, why don't you take a moment and tell the people anything you like, what you have going on, where to reach you, anything you want them to know. The floor is yours.
Well, we do have a really cool drop coming on Sovereign in, I don't want to, we haven't superficial, but the date is not superficial, but the next one is by MLO, the cloud artist.
Yeah, MLO.
That guy, art, and like I really am pretty stoked for that. Oh yeah, there's a little cloud. I've been looking at his previews. They're just absolutely gorgeous, and it's a reflection on his last 5 years of making cloud art that he began to do 5 years ago with
Awesome.
with one of the pieces that's in the MOCA permanent collection. Was one of his first cloud artwork. So that's kind of the beginning point. And this is like a really very just carefully, beautifully constructed review of those 5 years. So maybe that's a good ending point. That'll be in a couple weeks.
Awesome.
In October.
Cool. So yeah, please. Sorry.
One more thing that's cool. Mikey Woodbridge, who did a Leighton Couture with us, and is also my partner, by the way, if you're in Berlin, has a really groovy show where the whole Leighton Couture collection is in this one art center called Kindle Contemporary Art Center, and it'll be there for 5 months. And if you are in town, I will go there with you. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast, Ezra. You might not want to
I don't know. Unless you're a creep.
Yeah.
Then I'm not going.
Reach out to me at Cohen the Writer, and I'll figure out if you're a creep, and then I'll send you along to Ezra.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ezra, for being here with us. And I mean, this was a really wonderful, wide-ranging conversation, just as I hoped and wished for. If you are listening to this, please follow and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're hearing it, whether that's Spotify or Apple. We have new podcasts. They drop every Friday. This will be up on Friday. We have new podcasts dropping every Tuesday. That's current events. We have a Substack, museumofcryptoart.substack.com. And we'd like to see you in all of these places. And we'd like to just see more of you. So don't be afraid to hit us up. Don't be afraid to listen to us do our thing. We're really appreciative of you being here. We're really appreciative of you being here, Ezra. So thank you so much. And yeah, let's do this again sometime.
Right on. All right. Good to talk to you.
Likewise. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a